She thought she'd bought a weird pink prototype for parts forgotten in a corner of an old collector's warehouse. But when 4-year-old mechanic Liv Ramos peeled back the layers of dust, what she uncovered wasn't just a car. It was a one-off concept that had been scrapped before the world ever saw it. A design decades ahead of its time, linked to a vanished engineer, and now, worth $60 million. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories of rare machines, quiet geniuses, and second chances move you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story might just outdrive this one. The tow truck driver didn't even bother hiding his smirk. "You sure this is what you meant to buy?" he asked, one hand on the winch, the other gesturing toward the bubblegum pink hulk on the flatbed. Liv Ramos didn't answer right away. She stood still, gloves half on, staring at the low-slung supercar with the confused expression of someone who might have clicked the wrong auction lot. Again. It had arrived wrapped in a tattered gray tarp, the kind that usually covers forgotten furniture, not seven-figure sports cars. But this wasn't any sports car. It wasn't even labeled. Just a cryptic note scribbled in fading Sharpie on the shipping manifest. Project rejected 1987. Liv was used to junk. Her garage, inherited from her late Uncle Tony, was full of salvaged motorcycles, half-built drift cars, and engine blocks waiting on hope. But this car, it wasn't junk, it was just weird. Sleek lines, absurd curves, and a color so aggressively pink it made your teeth itch. It looked like something from a failed 80-second sci-fi movie. Yet underneath the bizarre paint and silence, something hummed, not the car, but her gut, a mechanic's instinct. This thing meant something. She walked around it slowly, boots crunching on broken concrete. The garage door was open, letting golden light spill across the floor. Her dog, Marty, barked once, from inside, but stayed curled up by the welder. Even he didn't know what to make of it. The driver lowered the car and handed her the keys, or rather, a single jagged stub of metal on a ring, with no tag. Liv didn't look up. "You see anything like this before?" "Lady," he said with a chuckle, "I've been towing weird metal for 15 years. I've hauled tanks, hearses, a jet boat with no engine. But this," he whistled low, "looks like Barbie broke into a wind tunnel." She almost smiled. Almost. The pink car sat low on custom wheels, the tires cracked but still holding air. The body was pristine, unnaturally so, given the age. No badges, no VIN she could see. Just that one rusted brass plaque bolted into the engine bay. Project rejected. 1987. Liv pushed open the door. It hissed slightly, like it hadn't moved in decades. Inside, the cabin was spotless. Leather seats the color of raspberry ice cream. Analog gauges. A strange triangular start button where the ignition should have been. And something else, blueprints scattered across the passenger seat, yellowed and curling at the corners. They weren't copies. They were originals. Hand-sketched. Signed. She reached for the papers, heart suddenly thudding. "Yo," the driver called. "Want me to leave the winch hooked in case you change your mind?" Liv looked up. "No," she said. "Unhook it. She's staying." And with that, the pink mistake became the center of Liv Ramos's world, a mystery wrapped in magnesium, waiting to roar. The blueprint paper crackled as Liv carefully unrolled it across her workbench, dust motes catching the last light from the setting Sunday. She recognized the layout instantly, a mid-engine design, the kind that hadn't become popular until decades after the date stamped in the corner, the 14th of September 1987. She traced a finger along the sketched intake system. It was a V16. No label, no manufacturer logo, just a single name signed at the bottom, in precise ink, E. D. LaRue. That name didn't ring any bells. Not in any design school Liv had studied, not in any manufacturer's Hall of Fame. But something about it felt familiar, like a name she'd overheard in a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. She grabbed her laptop and typed it in. No immediate hits. But then, buried in an obscure auto forum from 2006, she found it. Anyone ever hear of the LaRue concept? Cancelled before Geneva. Supposed to be a Veyron killer back when the Veyron didn't even exist. Whole thing got scrubbed. Car vanished. Designer disappeared. She leaned back, staring across the garage at the pink coupe now sitting under a dusty skylight. The same sweeping curves, the same oversized intakes. The blueprint matched exactly. Her chest tightened. What the hell was this thing? She opened the glove box. Nothing. Then the trunk. Nothing there either. But when she lifted the rear hatch and leaned into the engine bay, all custom-machined aluminum and ancient carbon weave, her eyes landed again on that plaque. Project Rejected, 1987. Just below it, a faint symbol had been scratched into the metal. Not stamped, scratched in, like it was added later. A tiny triangle, within a circle, etched by hand. Liv had seen that symbol before on a different piece of metal, long ago, tucked in her Uncle Tony's keepsake drawer. She jogged to the back of the shop, pulling down an old cigar box from the highest shelf. Inside, her uncle's lanyards, notes, a cracked plastic badge from the 1988 Pebble Beach Concept Showcase, and tucked behind that, a photo, grainy, half-faded. A young man in a rumpled suit standing beside a covered car. Scribbled on the back in Tony's handwriting, LaRue's ghost. Pulled before the show. Never seen it again. Liv stared at the photo, then back at the car in her garage. Same silhouette. Same weird curve of the rear fender. She felt her skin go cold. Tony had seen this car. And now, it was in her shop. She walked back to the car, slowly this time, like it might vanish if she moved too fast. She reached into her back pocket, pulled out her phone, and took a single photo. Then she texted it to an old friend who owed her a favor, a guy who worked in archival for one of the big auto houses in Detroit. Attached, the photo. Message: need to ID this as soon as possible. Might be worth more than my garage. She stood there a moment longer, staring at the car. Project rejected. Not anymore. By morning, the photo had 4 missed calls attached to it. 3 were from Max. The 4th was from a number. Liv didn't recognize Detroit area code. She didn't call back right away. Instead, she poured a mug of coffee, stood at the garage bay window, and stared at the pink car like it might start talking. The longer she looked at it, the more its confidence unnerved her. It didn't just sit still. It posed. Like it had been waiting all these years to be looked at again. Max finally sent a voice memo. His voice was sharp, urgent. Liv, that thing you sent me, it's real. Or at least, it's close. You need to check chassis weld points under the left intake. If they're scalloped in 6's LaRue's signature, call me back. Do not post that car anywhere public. She grabbed her gloves. The intake bolts were stubborn, probably untouched for decades. But once she got them free, she wedged her phone into the dark and snapped a picture. The welds were there. Clean, precise, and just like Max said, scalloped in perfect sets of 6. She exhaled slowly. This wasn't a replica. This was the prototype. Back at her workbench, she spread out the rest of the blueprints. Several were torn, water-damaged, but the sketches were breathtaking: active aero, sequential paddle shift, dual radiators, and some kind of cooling system she couldn't make sense of. It was futuristic now. In 1987, it would have looked alien. And then there was the note. Scribbled on the back of a napkin wedged between the drawings. No one believes in the pink one. But they will. They always do. If it hits 400 kph, I'll win the bet. If not, they scrap it. So I'm aiming for 401. Signed with a circle triangle symbol. Liv stared at the words. Heart pounding. Someone had bet their career on this car. And lost. A knock at the shop door broke her trance. It was Santiago, her landlord, an occasional headache. Just checking in, he said, eyes already scanning the garage. Saw the rollback yesterday. You finally flipped that drift car? Liv stepped between him and the Bugatti-shaped shadow. Nah, just cleaning out old projects. Santiago squinted. Huh, looked shiny. Then his eyes landed on the car behind her. Is that a Bugatti? Prototype, she lied. Kit car, custom body. He gave her a skeptical look but let it go. Well, just make sure it doesn't leak anything. Floor still smells like gear oil from that RX-7. He left without pressing, but Liv knew better. Curiosity was airborne in a town this size. If she didn't get ahead of the story, someone else would. She opened her laptop and created a folder. Project LaRue. Inside it, she uploaded the blueprints, the photo, the napkin, everything. Then she added a single line of text. Unknown prototype. V16 mid-engine. Possibly worth millions. Verification pending. Restore or reveal. She didn't have an answer yet, but she did have fire in her gut. The first time Liv tried to turn over the engine, it didn't even cough. It clicked. Once. A cold, dry sound that echoed in the silence, like an insult. She sat back on the floor, legs stretched, staring at the dead pink beast, like it had lied to her. For all its polished beauty, the internals were a mystery. No service records, no VIN, no past owners to call. Just LaRue's blueprints, scrawled napkin math, and the hushed reverence of a car that had become ghost and rumor. She'd thought maybe it would roar back, to life, or at least wheeze. Instead, it gave her a single click. She spent the rest of the night chasing electrical gremlins. The wiring harness was strange. Braided copper strands. Custom sheathing she'd never seen before. Even the fuses were hand-labeled, tucked inside a tiny polished case marked Mainline Beta. By 1 a.m., she had the dash partially pulled, and her hands covered in dust and frustration. Marty whined from his bed. "Yeah, I know," she said. "I should have left this one under the tarp." But Liv wasn't built for quitting. She regrounded the ignition relay, cleaned every connector, and pulled the battery leads. No corrosion. No obvious damage. Then she found it tucked behind a hand-carved aluminum panel in the rear firewall. A second, hidden ignition module. Custom-made. It looked more like an aircraft part than something you'd find in an 80 seconds prototype. She wired it in, took a breath, and turned the key again. This time, the click became a groan. The starter motor rolled once barely before cutting out. Progress. But the engine wasn't just reluctant. It was resisting. Like it didn't want to wake up. She checked compression. 2 cylinders were dead. 3 barely held pressure. Something was gummed up inside, frozen with time and neglect. She closed the engine hatch and sat down on the garage floor, back against the rear tire. The concrete was cold. Her shoulders ached. Somewhere past the skylight, the stars blinked above the roof. What the hell are you trying to protect? She thought. She reached for her phone and opened the photo of the napkin again. If it hits 400 kph, I win the bet. Who bets everything on a dream like that? Liv stood up, cracked her neck, and grabbed her notepad. She flipped to a fresh page and wrote 2 words at the top. Phase 0. Beneath it, a checklist formed compression test, bore scope inspection, fuel system flush, ECU decode. She didn't know how this car worked. But she would. Every inch, every wire, every stubborn bolt. She glanced at the clock. 3:11 a.m. Then she looked back at the car, silent, elegant, waiting. "You're not going to make this easy," she said under her breath. The car said nothing, but somehow, Liv felt it watching her back. The firewall wasn't supposed to have compartments. Liv knew this. She'd worked on exotics before Ferraris, Koenigsegg kits, even one ill-fated Lambo replica held together with zip ties and ego. But nothing she'd ever seen had a hidden, sealed envelope bolted behind heat shielding. She hadn't found it by design. It happened on accident, the kind of mistake mechanics hope to make once in a lifetime. She'd been tracing a coolant leak. Something faint, barely a stain. When she removed the firewall panel itself, a strange honeycomb aluminum lattice unlike anything she'd ever handled. A small envelope dislodged and floated to the ground like a feather. It was blackened at the edges. No stamp, no name, just that triangle and a circle symbol again, this time embossed on a wax seal. She stared at it, half expecting it to disappear if she blinked. Marty barked once, spooked by nothing. A cold breeze slid under the bay door, despite the still air outside. Liv knelt down and picked it up carefully, afraid it might crumble. Back at her workbench, she cut the seal gently with her utility knife and unfolded the pages inside. There were 2 sheets. The first was a letter typed, not handwritten, dated November 3rd, 1987. If you're reading this, it means they didn't destroy it. They tried. I made sure they failed. I paid for this design with everything: my reputation, my job, my family's silence. They called it dangerous. Too fast, too early. But it wasn't fear of failure that scared them. It was what it proved. The world wasn't ready to be beaten by a ghost. If you're rebuilding her, be careful. Not just with your hands. With your name, you'll be found. Let her run once. Just once. That's all I ask. LaRue. Liv felt the hairs rise on her arms. There was nothing romantic about this. Nothing mystical. But that letter, it felt scared. Not sad. Not dramatic. Scared. She opened the second page. It was a schematic, a completely different wiring layout than what she'd mapped so far. It bypassed the standard ignition entirely and routed through a kill switch system that didn't exist on the physical car. Not yet, at least. Someone had planned for sabotage. She folded the pages carefully and locked them inside her top drawer, beneath the pink shop rag she always kept for sentimental jobs, the kind she whispered through. Back at the firewall, she took another look inside the panel and found something else. A small black capsule, magnetically stuck to the interior rib. She twisted it open. Inside, a microfilm strip and a code etched on the plastic. C872LR. She didn't know what it meant, but someone would, and that meant she had to decide, soon, what this rebuild really was. A project? A resurrection? Or a target? She wiped her hands on her jeans, took a long breath, and did what she always did when she was afraid. Turned up the music, rolled up her sleeves, and went back to the engine bay. Because whatever this car was, it was waking up. The name E.D. LaRue was a dead end in every normal database. Liv scoured archives, trade journals, even called an old professor from her automotive engineering days, someone who'd taught an entire course on designers who changed everything and got none of the credit. But LaRue wasn't even a footnote. That kind of absence was deliberate. She finally found a mention in a 1989 internal memo buried in a leaked PDF from a defunct French automaker. The scan was fuzzy, typewritten in French, but one line stood out. LaRue's asset retired. Prototype never presented. Files redacted by external request. Retired was a nice word for erased. The day after she read it, Liv got a call. Blocked number. No voicemail. Just a 12-second pause before a synthetic voice said, "You've been searching for something you should leave alone." Then silence. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Max showed up, unannounced, a 3-hour drive from Detroit, and he hadn't even told her he was coming. He walked in, didn't say hi, just stared at the car. "It's real," he said, voice low. "I called a guy. He used to work for 4 Labs, one of the think tanks that developed race tech in the 80 seconds. He said the triangle in a circle was LaRue's private stamp. His designs were all signed with it. But the thing is, no one knows what happened to him." Liv folded her arms. "You're telling me the guy who designed this just vanished?" "Not vanished." Max met her eyes. "Buried. Industry blacklisted him. He filed patents no one approved. Built concepts that scared people. There was one rumor that he designed something faster than the McLaren F1 before the F1 ever existed. But the data disappeared before it could be verified." She turned toward the LaRue. The car didn't look threatening. It looked elegant. Like something meant to move through air without touching it. But under the hood was a V16 mapped to a computer system years ahead of its time, and now, Liv understood why it had been shelved. It wasn't that LaRue had failed. It was that he'd succeeded too soon. "Why me?" she muttered. Max raised an eyebrow. "What?" She shook her head. "I bought this thing at a forgotten warehouse auction. No label, no reserve, just a tarp and a scribbled manifest. Why was I allowed to find it?" Max hesitated. "Maybe you weren't." She didn't ask what he meant. Instead, she opened the microfilm scanner in the back of her garage, an old analog relic from her Uncle Tony's teaching days, and slid the capsule strip into the tray. It flickered to life. Blueprints, dozens. Suspension layouts, alternate fuel mappings, a prototype hybrid assist module that shouldn't have existed until 2005. And a final page, labeled only, Gen 2, successor to Project Rejected LaRue Estate, confidential. Liv leaned in. Her voice was quiet. "This isn't just a one-off." Max nodded, eyes wide. This was a series. It started with a phone call Liv never expected. Not Max. Not Santiago. Not another blocked number with threats disguised as warnings. This time, it was an auction house. Specifically, Valen and Rook, one of the top-tier, invite, only international brokers of rare cars, art, and occasionally things that were never supposed to exist. The voice was British. Polished. Polite. Miss Ramos, this is Adrian Cartwright from Valen and Rook's private acquisitions team. We've seen images of the vehicle currently in your possession. Would you be open to a preliminary valuation? Liv blinked, still in her grease-stained overalls. You're offering to buy it? No, Adrian said smoothly. We're offering to protect it. Assets like yours tend to attract attention. That word again. Attention. She ended the call without committing, then walked slowly back to the LaRue. She could hear the tick-tick-tick of cooling metal. It hadn't run, not fully, but it was trying. Like some sleeping machine willing its own return. She'd reached the point every builder fears and craves. The edge between mystery and momentum. She had the truth. The name. The data. She could strip it down and frame it as a museum piece. Or, she could finish what LaRue started. She ran her hand along the hood, eyes tracing the compound curves. No VIN, no label, no approval stamp. Just lines carved by obsession and silence. It wasn't street legal. It probably never had been. But something inside Liv cracked open in that moment. A voice she hadn't heard in years, not since her Uncle Tony's funeral, whispered from the back of her head. You don't rebuild legends to hide them. She got to work. Over the next 72 hours, she tore the LaRue down to its spine. The monocoque was pristine aerospace-grade aluminum bonded with carbon. She replaced the fuel lines, flushed the cooling system, rewired the custom ECU using a replica board Max printed from the microfilm specs. Every part that had failed was rebuilt to spec or better. Where LaRue had left notes, she followed. Where he'd left gaps, she dreamed. By Sunday night, the car sat low on the lift, gleaming in the fluorescent glow. Max brought food and tools. Santiago, curious now, stood in the doorway silently for 10 minutes before finally saying, "Whatever this is, you're gonna drive it, aren't you?" Liv looked at him. "Not for me." "Then who?" She tightened a bolt, wiped her hands, and answered simply, "For the guy who never got to." Monday morning, she posted a single photo to her private page. The car cleaned, restored, idling with one line. Rejection, resurrected. Within an hour, the post had 11,000 shares. 2 journalists reached out. One claimed they'd seen the car before in the back of a locked facility in Belgium. Another said it matched a patent sketch they'd dug up from a sealed Italian archive. And then came the biggest shock. A message request. Verified account. I knew LaRue. Call me. Ava Duval. Liv stared at the name. The name from her uncle's stories. LaRue's test driver. Ava Duval's voice was calm, but it held weight. The kind of weight that only comes from people who've seen something extraordinary and watched it be buried. I drove the LaRue prototype once, she said over speakerphone. In '87. 1 week before they pulled it from Geneva. Liv stood frozen, one hand on the fender, the other gripping a mug of untouched coffee. Why was it cancelled? Ava exhaled. Because it was faster than anything the old guard could explain. They built it in secret. LaRue and 4 engineers, 3 of them walked away. He didn't. Liv felt the words settle like dust on glass. What happened to him? No one knows. The car vanished. The team disbanded. And the files were absorbed into R&D departments no one talks about. It became a cautionary tale. Brilliant man. Wrong time. Did you know about the second design? Liv asked. Pause. Second? The Gen 2 files. They were in a microfilm capsule hidden behind the firewall. Another pause. This time heavier. I didn't know that existed, Ava said. But I'm not surprised. He never stopped designing, even when they took everything from him. Liv felt the urge to ask 100 more questions, but Ava beat her to it. Are you planning to run it? I want to, Liv said. I just don't know if it's safe. Or smart. Ava's voice softened. Then do what he would have done, run it once. Not for the record. Not for the money. For the truth. That night, Liv stared at the LaRue under the glow of her shop's single skylight. She could take the auction house offer. She could sell the story, cash the check, and fade into comfortable anonymity. But something about that felt like betrayal. This car had survived blacklists, sabotage, silence, and time. Not to be mounted, but to move. She opened her laptop and started typing. Exclusive run project rejected returns. She posted it anonymously to a performance forum frequented by journalists and speed freaks. No names, no location, just a date and a promise. One run, no press, no permits, just legacy. By morning, it had gone viral. Liv's phone buzzed constantly. Offers, invitations, threats. One caller claimed to be from a compliance group, asking her to cease activities tied to classified mechanical property. She hung up. Max called. "You sure about this?" "No," she said honestly. "But I've never been more right." 2 nights later, under cover of darkness, Liv loaded the LaRue onto a flatbed. No markings. No GPS. Just her, Max, and Santiago who, to everyone's surprise, offered to drive the lead van. They weren't going to a track. They were going to the old airstrip. The one her Uncle Tony used to take her to on weekends. The one with the mile-long straight no one cared about anymore. She wasn't chasing a number. She was chasing a moment. And if the LaRue made it to the end of that runway, history would no longer be missing a chapter. It would be rewritten. The airstrip was silent. No banners, no crew, just the sound of crickets, and a long, cracked stretch of pavement lit by 3 mobile work lamps and a sky full of stars. The kind of silence that made engines feel louder, more alive. Liv stood at the front of the LaRue, helmet in hand, heart thudding like a drum solo in her ribs. Max gave the car one final systems check. ECU stable. Coolant flows perfect. Tires are, he paused, watching the gauges flicker as the system synced. Everything's green. Santiago whistled low. Hard to believe this thing was a footnote in someone's warehouse. Liv didn't answer. She was already gone mentally inside the machine. The cockpit wrapped around her like it had been molded for her shoulders. The seat hugged her frame. The gauges lit with a gentle hum. She slid the triangular key into the ignition slot, paused, and turned it. The engine came to life like a restrained beast, not a roar. A growl. Deep. Confident. The exhaust note didn't scream for attention, it demanded respect. She rolled toward the line slowly. Ava's voice echoed in her head. "Don't chase the number, chase the moment." She pressed the pedal gently, and the LaRue crept forward. The mid-mounted V16 responded instantly, not aggressive, but alert. Like it remembered what it was built for. At the start line, Max gave a nod. No countdown, no flag, just Liv, the car, and the broken promise of 1,987. She hit the throttle. The rear end dug in, tires gripping with a sound like tearing silk. The acceleration was violent not because it lacked control, but because it had waited so long to be felt. Every gear shift was seamless. Every input obeyed like instinct. The road flew beneath her. Wind pressed against the windshield, howling past the windows like applause. The dash read 220 kilometers per hour, then 280. She was halfway down the strip when the power curve shifted. The hybrid assist kicked in, just like the microfilm had described. She hit 310, 340. The chassis remained calm. 360, 370. The rear stabilizers adjusted on their own. Then 401. She exhaled. Not because she hit it, but because the car had finally finished the sentence it started decades ago. By the time she braked at the far end of the strip, her hands were shaking. The LaRue purred, idle steady, heat tickling off the vents. Not a single warning light, not a single flaw. Max and Santiago pulled up in the van, both speechless. She stepped out, pulled off her helmet, and looked back at the long black streak behind her. "You just rewrote the ending," Max finally said. 3 weeks later, the video leaked not by her, but someone on the forum. It hit 4 million views in 48 hours. That's when the first real offer came. $60 million. Private collection. Confidential buyer. Liv didn't say yes. She didn't say no, either. She just stared at the LaRue under shop lights and whispered, "You're worth more than that." The key hung on a rusted nail above her workbench, not locked away, not framed. Just there. Simple. Quiet. Like it had always belonged. Liv stared at it every morning now, sipping black coffee in silence before the garage opened. The chaos had passed, the headlines faded. But the LaRue? Still parked under the skylight, dusted, protected, untouched since the run. She'd had 6 separate offers since the video went public. 3 from collectors, 1 from a private museum, 1 from a hedge fund claiming automotive asset appreciation strategy, and 1 from someone she couldn't trace. They didn't want to display it. They wanted to own the silence around it. That was the offer she shredded without a second thought. Everyone expected her to cash out. The press called her the girl with the ghost car. Forums speculated about her next move. Was she going to restore Gen 2? Publish the microfilm? Retire? Disappear? She did none of those things. Instead, she reopened her shop. The calls kept coming, of course, restoration requests, brand deals, even a documentary crew offering a 7-figure package for the full story. She turned down most of them, not out of arrogance, out of instinct. The LaRue didn't belong on a stage. It belonged in motion. And yet, Liv hadn't driven it since that night. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't need to. It had done what it was built to do and more. It proved a man's vision wasn't foolish. It proved timing could be wrong, but truth never was. And maybe most importantly, it gave a young woman with busted knuckles and a haunted garage something she hadn't felt in years: direction. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Just the triangle in a circle, stamped into the seal. Inside, a single sentence. Thank you for listening when no one else would. No signature, just a postscript. Gen 2 is real. It's waiting. Liv folded the letter and slid it into the drawer next to the microfilm. She didn't know where Gen 2 was. Not yet. But she knew this wasn't over. Marty barked from the corner, tail thumping against a crate of spark plugs. She smiled, set down her coffee, and reached for a wrench. A customer was due in at 9, a single mom with a Corolla that wheezed worse than an old man in winter. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And these days, Liv understood better than anyone legacy isn't about being seen. It's about being felt. She walked past the LaRue, paused, and tapped the hood lightly with her knuckle. The metal was cool, silent, but somehow, still humming. She didn't frame the key. She didn't sell the car. She kept both, not as trophies, as proof. Proof that sometimes the world calls something a mistake, just because it doesn't understand it yet.